on a different.
Okay, wait. Everyone's getting seated, Cheryl. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
We're gonna quiet the masses so that they can hear you. So Cheryl,
Yes.
question. I'm gonna wait 1 second. I'm gonna post us up on Facebook. And so let me put us up on. Oh, yeah, for sure. Since we've been doing this online, they've been on with us. So hold it a second. I'm just putting us up on Facebook. We're getting it all taken care of. Thank you, Mike. All right, everybody. So hopefully it's working. And let's get going. Wait 1 second. It says it's not streaming, but I think it is. What? Hold it a second. Yeah, it's working. All right, we're on. So listen up, everybody. Joyce has a question and she has a statement to make. Yes. Take it away, Joyce. We're all listening. Or Cheryl, sorry.
Oh, me. Okay.
Yes, hold it a second. Yes.
So David and I have been watching this TV series.
Yep.
And there is an Israeli man in there, and he talks to a woman and calls her, refers to her as neshama. And I looked it up, and the word it says means soul.
Yep.
And yet I've never heard of that used as a term of endearment.
So first of all, neshama is sometimes a name. I actually was on the phone with neshama this morning, a great neshama. Her name is Neshama Karlebach. Her father, Rabbi Shlomo Karlebach, was one of the great Jewish musicians. And we're going to bring her out to LA to do a Shabbat with us. But neshama, very interesting person. And again, she has that as her name. And so it is a name sometimes. It's one of the words for a soul, for a spirit, soul. So we say neshama, right? A good neshama. It's Yiddish, right? You've heard that phrase. That means a good soul. A good neshama means a good soul. It's a perfect blend of Hebrew and Yiddish, right? In German and German and Hebrew, right? So neshama. Now the other word we have for soul that we oftentimes hear is the word nefesh, right? Nefesh.
Translated as rested.
Soul. Nefesh, right?
But it says nefesh.
Nefesh, yeah. Sometimes translated as spirit or soul. We say it's in the Shema, the author, right? Bechol nafshecha, with all of your soul, with all your spirit. So we also use the word nefesh. And the other word we have for soul or spirit in the Bible that's used is the word ruach. And the ruach, yeah, spirit, right? That's energy. So all three of those words are used as words for soul or spirit. That, there's differentiations in Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism. There's differences on kind of like how the soul is kind of different levels of soul, or there's different kinds of spirits essentially that inhabit us. And like that, sometimes they're seen as kind of like energies that are the highest levels of energy might be, again, the neshama, the highest soul. Whereas the ruach might be seen as the breath or the spirit that keeps us energized, but not necessarily kind of like our Holy Spirit. And the nefesh is kind of an intermediate spirit. So there's sometimes differentiations between them. Sometimes they're just used kind of interchangeably, but they're all used. They're all based in the Torah. So all three of those words go back to the Bible itself, and they're all used for different things. And from where they're used, that's why we sometimes have these like associations with different levels of the spirit. So for example, and by the way, the Egyptians believed in the 3-level spirit that each of us possesses as well, an essence, if you will. But the ruach, because the ruach is the air, the energy, the breath, that God would breathe into the first person, into Adam, that's the animating spirit that kind of gives life to things. But it also says in the Bible that there's a ruach kol basar, there's a spirit in all flesh, which seems to imply that even animals would maybe have a ruach. Then you get into this issue of, well, what about a nefesh? And so some people say that if you look at the nefesh and the way it's used, is it might be kind of like considered like a higher essence of spirit or higher essence of soul, but maybe still somewhere between like human and divine. And one of the reasons why neshama or nishma or nishmat is the word is like is interesting when it has a feminine structure, right? So every noun in Hebrew has a feminine or a masculine structure, which means like if you pluralize it, right? If you turn it into a plural, then it will be a feminine sound or a masculine sound. So though you can make a plural, or the bottom line is that neshama has a feminine structure, it's a gender specific, but that's not the point I was going to say. Is there's a famous line in the book of Proverbs. It's a beautiful line. It's actually, if you look, it's actually up on the behind the bema at Mount Sinai Cemetery, and it's probably other cemeteries too. And the line is Ner Adonai Nishmat Adam, which comes from Proverbs, which means the flame of God is the spirit of man. The flame of God, Ner Adonai Nishmat Adam. The flame of God is the spirit of man, Nishmat Adam. So that's an interesting idea, that the spirit that's in us, that's like the holiest spirit, the most divine spirit is the neshama. So sometimes people, that's why it kind of comes down as like the highest level neshama, but and it's kind of like the part of us that's like the most divine. But anyways, it's a exercise somewhat in identifying the words in the Bible and then trying to figure out where they fit. So anyways, but it does go back to the Bible. So I hope that helps. But that's a little bit about neshama, probably more than you probably even wanted to know. But I like the word, and it is just funny that I happen to have been speaking to neshama today about helping elevate people and making music, helping music elevate our soul. And it's a very interesting story because, and we'll talk about it, and maybe even we discuss today, maybe even speak about something very interesting, which is that Neshama Karlbach actually was canceled 5 years ago, not for anything she really did, but for something, again, that her father was accused of doing, and it actually affected her. And so it's a very interesting discussion, and one that has to do with culture and with who we are today. But that's a story for another time. But we are working on doing recording a Shabbat in New York with her. So again, if you want to learn about Rabbi Karlbach, Shlomo Karlbach, or if you want to learn about Neshama, all this stuff is out there. There's a little information you can find. I just happened to search it today, so you can find some of the stuff. And it's interesting that you brought that up today, just now, Cheryl, because I spoke to a Neshama just now. Anyways, that being said, let's go to the text. Let's go to Deuteronomy. I do want to mention too. So last week we were not here because we saw Golda, some of us, and we had a chance to see Golda, and it really did make us think a lot about the Yom Kippur War. It made us think about, I think it was very appropriate that it came out now, because we're going to be commemorating the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War at Yom Kippur in a few weeks. And it's 50 years.
Wow.
And it's the last time. Yeah, right. It's the last time Israel was invaded. And I think we need to think about it. And it's a special anniversary. So came out at a good time. Some people thought it wasn't sufficiently pro-Israel. Some people felt it was too pro-Israel. Look, I definitely don't think it was anti-Israel. I think people, they've really kept it to the time period and to what was at stake and into, I think, to rehabilitate her image somewhat because, the assessment, especially over the last 20, 30 years, was that she was just over her head and couldn't handle the situation at Yom Kippur, though this movie kind of makes it look like she really held it together and everyone else, Moshe Dayan looks like a complete train wreck in this. And
that surprised me.
yeah,
But
but
facts to support that?
yeah, and there's been a lot of re-evaluation of Moshe Dayan in the last 20 or 30 years, that a lot of the myth about him was not based on reality, and that he was it was inflated, his roles. But it was, I think it actually depicted the Israelis in I think a fairly positive way. And it, some people said it made Golda look too bloodthirsty, which, the fact that she was holding them accountable and wanted to punish them.
You mean with the 30?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they made it very clear that when the Third Army, the Egyptian army, was being surrounded and there were tens of thousands of soldiers, she was willing to kill them.
Yeah.
They supported Sharon's reputation.
And they somewhat supported Sharon's reputation. I think they did. Though, again, they showed that China farms did cost a lot of lives. One of the counteroffensive that the Israelis launched on Egypt. And then the other thing, and I think it's good to have that out there. And there's a famous line that she said to him, and she supposedly said it to other people too, which is every political career ends in failure, which it did for Sharon. So I think that was a little bit of a dig on him, because he did end up becoming a politician, and his legacy was mixed. So there was that was the one little like modern thing that they got in there, but if they didn't make Sharon look bad, they just basically said he was very aggressive and that he had the guts to draw this counteroffensive out, which it shows that Golda supported. So no matter what, she must have supported it, and I think that's obvious. They wouldn't have done it unless she did it. The one thing I think, again, they weren't telling a war story, but I think they really didn't talk about what happened in the Syrian campaign in the Golan. And for those of us that went to the Golan and saw the Valley of Tears, they didn't really explain how the Israelis held off the Syrian army.
Right.
And were able, because they show Moshe, I don't want to ruin it for people who haven't seen it, but they show Moshe Dayan flying over and really having a bad reaction to what he saw. And then all of a sudden it's over. All of a sudden they come back and all they're fighting is Egypt. The Syrian campaign was over. And that story is a really important story of how the Israelis held it off. And I will tell you that it has been dramatized, because the movie, the miniseries Valley of Tears, which is on HBO Max, you can watch it. I think it's a 3 or 4 part, very powerful movie. Yeah. Came out of Israel a few years ago called Valley of Tears. You can watch that, and it's only about the Syrian campaign. And it shows you how the Israelis fought and died and held off a much more powerful Syrian army. And they showed it in the movie, but they didn't really explain what happened. All of a sudden it's over. And I think that was a disservice, because they established how scary it was, and then they just ended. It just ended.
Right.
And so you have to explain how it ended. Once you show it, you can't then just say, oh, and everything's fine. And I didn't like that, because again, I know they weren't trying to show the battle campaign, but they should have at least explained, throw out 2 sentences
Right.
about how they stopped it. So they missed that. And the other thing that I think is a really good extra thing to watch, which I think supports pretty much what you saw, though I think it probably overstated how heroic he was, is Netflix had I think a 2 or 3 part miniseries a few years ago called The Angel, which was about Marwan, Asaf Marwan, who was the Egyptian spy.
Very good.
Was very good, but I think they intentionally made it look like he was more of service to the Egyptians. In the movie that they did on Netflix, they basically, well, you watch it and you can decide, but I think they made him look a little bit better as an Egyptian, because he was the spy that Israel relied on for the information of the 73 war. And they refer to him in the movie several times, and they basically say, we have Marwan's intelligence, Marwan's telling us this, Marwan's telling us that. And they didn't. I don't want to ruin it. Watch The Angel. It's good. It's well done.
What is that on?
It's on Netflix. And so Marwan, it's called The Angel, and it's on Netflix. It's still there. And that'll tell you the story of Marwan, and it shows you why, at least he says that he did, from his standpoint of why he did it. But the movie shows that they really relied on his information. But watch it and you can come to your own conclusions. But I think if you watch Valley of Tears and you watch The Angel, 2 very good additions. The Spy is very good. That's Ellie Cohen, but that's about the 67 war. By 73, a lot of that stuff is already, unfortunately, a lot of Ellie Cohen's information was already useless by then, because the Syrians had a chance to adapt to what had happened with Ellie Cohen. But yes, the Spy that was about Ellie Cohen and the 67 war was very well done, with Sacha Baron Cohen playing Ellie Cohen. Netflix is The Angel. But the Spy, it's called The Spy, is also on Netflix. That was the Ellie Cohen story. And that's really about the 67 war, the lead up to that. It's very well done too. But Valley of Tears is on HBO. Not a lot of people saw that, because I don't think as many people have HBO, but it's still there. It was still there last week. And if you want to watch that, it's very hard to watch because the Golan Heights, the battle for the Golan was a disaster for the first few days. I mean, the Israelis just saw streams, waves and waves of tanks coming over the border, and they couldn't do anything to stop it. And again, the Golden movie explains somewhat why, which is that, they refused to listen to the evidence and refused to reinforce, bring up the reserves. So watch those 2 in addition to Golda. But watch Golda too. I mean, I think the movie, I think the movie was well done, and I think it was well done. I mean, I think from the standpoint of a film, it's a well done movie. It's not just interesting. Who, Helen Mirren?
Yeah.
Oh, Golda?
Yeah.
Golda was originally, they say in the movie, she's originally was from Ukraine, from Russia.
Well, that's
She was
right.
raised, and then she was the Russian Empire at the time. I don't want to say Ukraine because it was the Russian Empire at the time. I want to just be historically accurate. But then she came to Milwaukee as a young woman, and she was raised in Milwaukee, which is why she had an American accent. And she did. She talked like an American Jew of her time who was born in the old country. She spoke better English actually than some of our bubbies, but she was, a woman who was born at the turn of the century. She was a little girl. She would have been a little girl from Fiddler on the Roof. She would have been born in Anatevka and come to America and settled, her family happened to settle in Milwaukee. But she was a critical asset in securing American support for Israel, because she spoke like an American Jew. And she spoke the language of American Jews and understood American Jews. She was a wonderful person. This movie is specifically dealing with her during the Yom Kippur War, literally dealing with her over a 3-week period. You don't see much anything besides that 3-week period. But there is a lot that they could have done about her, and talked about her personal life, which is an interesting story in itself. And they also could have talked about her upbringing and some of the things that she did that were very, very daring and very, very brave, including meeting with, King Hussein, and meeting with Russian leaders, and doing stuff that was just very, very unusual for a woman to do in those days. It's undeniable. But they weren't telling that story. They were telling the story of her keeping the country together during war. So anyways, go see it. I'll bet money that Helen Mirren's nominated for an Academy Award. If she isn't, it's because they decided to mess with Israel. 100%. And that will be Jews that have decided to do that, by the way.
So there was no outcry that she's not Jewish? She was.
There was
wonderful.
discussion about it, and I think she answered it in the Q&As. If you saw the Q&A,
I
she
did
discussed it.
twice.
And she said she understands that people had an issue. The family didn't have an issue with her, which I think is at the end of the day, the most important thing is that they wanted her to do it. And look, Helen Mirren, two things you should know about. She said in the documentary, in the Q&A part, the live part, that she lived in a kibbutz in the 1970s. She was dating an Israeli guy and she actually lived in Israel for a while. So that's number one. That gives her to me a little bit of substance because, to do it because she actually cared about Israel. I will tell you something else, which and it shouldn't be said, but it has to be said. She's an actress in Britain, from Britain, and you have no idea how anti-Israel the British media and the British celebrity class is. The normal default position for British celebrities is to be anti-Israel. That's the default position. And then the question is how anti-Israel you are. So the amount of pro-Israel celebrities, musicians, actors, writers who are pro-Israel, they're a fraction and they're constantly under attack. So the fact that she does this and she's willing to do that is actually, it shouldn't be, but it's actually a very, very bold and classy thing that
And
she did.
proud of what she did.
She is 100% hated by a good segment of her colleagues because of her position. I can literally count on one hand, the amount of British celebrities that were willing to take a pro-Israel stance, because the default position is not necessarily as bad as, Roger Waters. Everybody talks about Roger Waters from Pink Floyd, how anti-Israel he is, but he's not the only one. I heard Eric Clapton last week,
Oh,
very anti-Israel, basically mad that people are on top of Roger Waters. And so, yeah, it's disappointing. And he's actually just, again, pretty much, he's Eric Clapton's maybe a little further, but pretty much the normal British anti-Israel. J.K. Rowling is pro-Israel. Morrissey from the group The Smiths is pro-Israel.
why
And-
is that the British position?
Because
Because I can get the American position when I talk with people that aren't like anti-Israel in America, like they don't hate Israel, the country, they're just like, we shouldn't send all our money there. I'm like, it's a
that's
fair
not
argument.
what we're talking about.
I know, that's what
We're
I'm
not
saying.
talking about support. We're talking about literally saying that Israel is an
Okay.
apartheid state,
Yeah,
that Israel is killing Palestinians,
Unjust.
with
Why
no
did the British
consequences.
care? I'm confused.
The British, there's
Why? 'Cause they screwed up the Balfour Declaration.
the British have always been partly responsible for this, and some of it goes back to, again, that period. But the British have always been, there's always been a problem because of that poor administration of this problem in the first place. So that's part of it, but it also is because, generally speaking, the British media, the default position is always going to be, I'm going to say this to not offend anybody, but it is always going to be default liberal. The liberal position in America is not as anti-Israel for the liberals. Again, you can get mad at me for saying this, but I'm going to say it. The liberal position in America on Israel is less pro-Israel,
Right.
but it is not like it is in most countries.
And where was Winston Churchill in his attitude?
He was pro-Israel, but he was one of
That's
the,
what I thought.
that was
He
one of, but
the few.
Winston Churchill was one of the few
That's what I thought.
leaders of Britain. There were always the odd person that was. Fortunately, most of the people who've had power in Britain have been pro-Israel, but the fear is always that somebody's going to come into power who's not going to be pro-Israel. So it is a real problem that Britain is the default position, especially for the media and the celebrities. Why it hasn't happened in America is a question for another time. But I will tell you that we are worried about it. I think most people are worried about it. I get texts and emails from people on the left all the time when somebody on the left does something that is anti-Israel. But That's where it is now.
But with the British being anti-Israel, that's nothing new.
No, it's not new.
It goes back to.
It's not new, but the problem is that where we're at today is that the media and the celebrity class has been entrenched in it now for so long that almost if you break away from it, you have to defend your actions for doing it. And that's the difference. In the last 15, 20 years, the default position has been don't perform in Israel. So if you're a British musician and you decide to have a concert in Israel, you're going to get flack for it, and people are going to boycott you, and they're going to demonize you in the media. So there are a lot of British musicians, Elvis Costello, there's several high profile British musicians who will not perform in Israel, period. If you're an American musician and you said that, by the way, there are American musicians who don't perform in Israel, who won't perform in Israel, but won't say so. But there's no way to know it because they would never come out and say, I will not perform in Israel.
They just don't
They just
accept.
don't do it. Yeah. So you don't really know, but there are a lot of, the normal situation for a British musician is if you're going to perform in Israel, you're going to deal with an outpouring of hate against you.
Did Elton John perform in Israel?
I don't know.
I don't
That's a
know.
good question. I don't know. Did he? I mean, he might have. But remember, Elton John spends more time in the United States than he does in Israel.
This is true.
He also spends more, yeah,
He has dual citizenship.
he does not spend, he's been much more Americanized. British musicians who spend more time in America are almost always going to not have that default position. I mean, Paul McCartney doesn't. A lot of the British musicians that you'd think of as like,
McCartney lives here.
I know, but he's also been married to Jewish people, but he's not anti, he's not, I think his current wife is Jewish too.
Really?
So, yeah, his only wife who wasn't Jewish was the one he wasn't married to for very long. And she didn't like, but anyways, the point is that
Go there.
the problem is again, the default position in England for the most part is it's not for the most part, the default position is anti-Israel. You have to explain why. And again, you're gonna get boycotted. So it's difficult to know. But we, look, that's why we don't want to have the same thing happen here. I will tell you, by the way, I will tell you the secret of why it doesn't happen here so far, which is that American Jews have not let it happen here. You and I have not let it happen here. And specifically, not just the people in this room, but the people across the hill and across the other hill, who are the agents, managers, accountants, the people who are the business managers for these people, who will not let them do it. So for the most part, and I've talked to people about it, and the closest that we got to it was, you saw what happened with Kanye West. And he wasn't canceled, he was evaporated. But his stuff wasn't just about Israel, his stuff was about Jews. But that was an easy. But Roger Waters is flat-out anti-Semitic. He's not just talking about Israel. He came out in his concert in Germany a couple of months ago in an SS uniform.
Well, another major, I'm not going to say the name, another major entertainer was retracted something that he said. I'm not gonna say it.
Yeah, I mean, look, this has been an issue, and Kanye got called out by people in his own community too, because it unfortunately has happened more in the African American community. So it has been called out.
Talked about Kanye West, talked about his real name, D.
All right, so after that discussion, let's go to Passover. No, last week, 2 weeks ago, sorry, the last time we were together, we talked about Passover. We talked about, we talked about kashrut. We talked about the animals that we're supposed to eat, which again in the Torah, it is. Let me go up. We finished in 15 actually. That is. Oh, wait a second. No, we finished in 14. I went too far, guys. We finished right here. So these are the animals. It was divided into three, into land animals, fish, and birds. And it's a much shorter list than we have in Leviticus. And again, it pretty much goes through animals that were not going to be animals that ate other animals. You're trying to eat things that are the closest to the being herbivores, and obviously to the herbs themselves, right? Into not eating things that are eating other things that are eating things. So that is the lesson from this.
Because locusts, don't they eat bugs too?
Yeah, but here it didn't even talk about locusts.
They did, that's right.
So this one, basically, if you read this, where it says all winged swarming things are impure for you, they may not be eaten. You may only eat pure winged creatures, seems to be leaving us only with chicken, duck, those kind of things. It does not include,
Earlier, it
yes,
does.
Leviticus is specific about the locusts that you can eat. And again, the assumption was, because if they eat all your grain, what are you going to eat? But
Well, what is my all wings when one part is pure and pure?
well, here, the only ones that you can eat, it says you may eat any pure bird. And that's all it says. And then it gives you all the animals that you can't eat.
Gotcha.
So any of the birds that eat any of these other, eat anything else, right? Any other kind of animal or eat carrion, those are off. And then it tells you, you can't eat any, you can only eat pure winged creatures. And then it says specifically, you shall not eat anything that has died a natural death, give it to a stranger in your community, or you can sell it to a foreigner. And then it finishes with, you shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. And as we mentioned, this is the third time the Torah says this, lo tevashel gedi b'chalev imo, which we think at one point may have been because of a ritual, something that Canaanites did where they would actually boil a kid in its mother's milk. We, at least even by Deuteronomy, it seems like it doesn't seem to be just about that. It seems to be, again, about the way we prepare the animals. The Torah says it 3 times, so the rabbis interpreted from that. That's boiling, cooking, frying, any kind of way you could. Doesn't just have to be boiling. Any kind of preparation of milk and meat together is not okay, which is why it's such a strict law, and why for thousands of years Jews have had separate dishes for meat and dairy, because it says it 3 times. And when something in the Bible is repeated 3 times, I mean, that's not an accident, right? That's not just it must be pretty important. So that's why it was traditionally an important issue for us. But again, was it one time, a specific thing with a goat being boiled in its mother's milk? That's what it says. So that's where we left off. And so if we're reading the rest of the portion, and again, to break it here, we could have said, hey, this is about food, this next part, and I'm going to tell you, I said it last time, there is not a rhyme or reason for the way these laws are grouped together. It's a miscellany of laws. And so don't look for an explanation for why these pop up the way they do. Because, I mean, you could say, well, we just talked about food, and so now it's talking about you shall set aside every 10th part of the yield of sowing that was brought in from the field. You shall consume the tithes of your new grain and wine and oil, and the firstlings of your herds and flocks in the presence of God. Now, wait, did we read this part or not?
No.
We did not read this part. No, I didn't think so. And it says here again, though, something we have seen before. That's why all of a sudden I said, did we read this part again? But this part we've read several times in Deuteronomy. In the place where God will choose to establish the divine name, so that you may learn to revere your God Adonai forever. That is, go to Jerusalem and only Jerusalem. You shall go to the place, right, where God will choose. Now, that's why this next line is so interesting. Should the distance be too great for you, should you be unable to transport them because the place where your God Adonai has chosen to establish the divine name is so far from you, known as Jerusalem, and because your God Adonai has blessed you, you may convert them into money. Wrap up the money and take it with you to the place that your God Adonai has chosen. And spend the money on anything you want, cattle, sheep, wine, or other intoxicant, or anything you desire. You shall feast there in the presence of your God Adonai and rejoice with your household. And there it says, Vasamachta ata uvetecha. Rejoice there with your family. Rejoice there with your household. Now, you thought it was going to say, give it to the priest. It didn't say that. I mean, some of it's going to the priest,
Same thing.
some of it's going to the priest, but you get to have a party there too. And that's what it says. You shall have a feast there. You're going to eat there, you and your family. And so you get to actually go to Jerusalem to celebrate. And we're going to get to that specifically. But you don't have to bring the animals with you. That's the most important thing, is it's now given us permission. Nowhere up until this moment have we had that, which is one of the reasons why we believe that this book of Deuteronomy was written hundreds of years after Exodus and Leviticus, when it's written by people who are now living all over the region, maybe even outside of the land of Israel. And they are basically being told, if you have your flocks and your stuff at home, you don't have to bring them. Because how are you going to bring them?
They keep saying where God has chosen.
Yes,
And of course, you're not going to put Jerusalem because they know people are going to be reading.
they
that.
know that Moses couldn't have
Right.
said Jerusalem.
Right.
But it says it so many times that it's almost ridiculous. But it's also, by the way, telling you it's not just the place where the priests have made the temple. It's where God has chosen.
Right.
It's not David chose it, which he kind of did. He did. He chose it.
Yeah.
He chose it.
That's why
David
it's a
chose
city
it.
of David.
He chose it. And at least for the first few generations, it seems, some people went to Jerusalem to offer sacrifice, and some people just offered them in their local backyard or their local shrine to Adonai. You know, they went to Bethel or they went to these other places and they offered up their sacrifices. But the idea of centralizing the religion was very important. But it was important not just to the priests, it was important to the kings and to the power center who wanted to make sure that the power was there. It's the same again, same idea of basically telling people, we're not just going to have our government based here, we're going to have our economy based here. And if you want to make money, you got to come here. And there are a lot of people that live in Virginia and Maryland. They don't just live in Washington, D.C., but they live there because it's right near Washington, D.C. And folks, that's where the money is.
Money in the power.
That's where the money is. So it's not just a matter of keeping the government there, but it's also keeping the money there. So it tells us, though, in the process of centralizing the government, but do not neglect the family of the Levite in your community, for he has no hereditary portion as you have. So you got to take care of the Levites who live amongst you, because if everyone's going to Jerusalem and no longer patronizing the Levites, they don't have a place to live. They don't have their own flocks. They don't have their own stuff. So you have to keep them going. But of course, who wants to live on someone else's charity? The Levites didn't want it. That's not what the Levites wanted to do. Throw us a bone and tell us, hey, remember the Levites? No one ever had to tell the Levites that, because the people that, because the Levites got the sacrifices like the Kohanim did. It was only after the city of David is established and there's one temple and there's one place where people go where these people are out of work. I'm telling you, this is the most important clue to what goes on in the Bible, where the fight between the Levites and the Kohanim is there all the time. We just aren't aware of it. But it's the subtext that's probably the most important subtext in the entire Bible. If you want to know why the Bible says some of the stuff that it does, including a line like this, it's because of that fight between the local Levite and the Kohanim. Because the Bible itself shows us how that happened, how that developed. Because in the book of Leviticus, you didn't have this. You didn't have this idea that the priest can't offer, the local Levite can't offer a sacrifice in his backyard. So how do you support them? Every third year you shall bring out the full tithe of your yield that year, but leave it within your settlements. Then the family of the Levite, who has no hereditary portion as you have, and the stranger and the fatherless and the widow in your settlement shall come and eat their fill, so that your God Adonai may bless you in all the enterprises you take. Now, just so you know, Deuteronomy just classified the Levites with every other marginalized people there. Throw me a bone. That wasn't supposed to be what happened. But Deuteronomy basically has to say that. So you can see why the Levites, or how the Levites lost power. The Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. And that's what you get throughout the rest of Deuteronomy. All right. These are some other laws that are repeated from Leviticus. Every 7th year, you shall practice remission of debt. So you see, it's going to say, well, it's going to talk about it throughout this. Well,
Bankrupt?
no, not just that, because you don't have to be bankrupt. This shall be the nature of the remission. All creditors shall remit the due that they claim from their fellow Israelites. They shall not dun their fellow Israelites or kin, for the remission proclaimed is of Adonai. You may dun the foreigner, but you must remit whatever is due from your kin. So you're not allowed to charge interest. You're not allowed to charge a penalty to Israelites, but you are to somebody else. And again, this is the law of usury. We saw it again in Leviticus. This isn't the first time we've seen it. But as we mentioned then, and we'll mention it now, this is why Jews were allowed to lend money to Gentiles, but not to other Jews for interest. Eventually, we circumvented that and figured out a way to lend money to our own people. But the idea that at the end of 7 years, whatever debt they owed had to have been collected and had to have been paid up meant that people really had to make sure that the people that they lent money to were going to give it back. And you can imagine that there was probably enforcement of those debts, the debt collection, because they knew that at the end of 7 years, they technically couldn't do it. As I said, by 2,000 years ago, by the time of Rabbi Hillel, we have a flat out overturning of that law. It's one of the few examples of the Bible of a law that the rabbis basically said, we can't follow that rule. And the reason that they couldn't follow that rule is because that rule can work if you have a society where people own land and they're trading value that's guaranteed by property. But when people are trading in a commercial way and it's not guaranteed by property, there is no way you can have a situation where you have debts that can't be collected. So this rule worked fine when everyone had a tribal portion and everyone had a tribe to back them up and had tribal land. But 2,000 years ago, so 1,000 years after this, 500 years after this, or 1,000 years after it was first in Leviticus, but 500 years maybe after it was in Deuteronomy, people couldn't do this anymore because they didn't have tribal land. There was no tribal holdings. Once the temple was destroyed, once the Babylonians destroyed the tribal situation, there was no. When Jews came back to the land of Israel, they had their homes and they had their, but they didn't have a tribal holding. There was no tribes anymore. Tribes were all messed up. So when the Jews come back, the Persians let them come back. There's no tribes anymore. There's no tribe. We're all called Jews. We're Judeans. There's no Zebulun, there's no Naphtali, there's no Shimon, there are no tribes anymore. So there's no way to say, well, hey, my tribe can back me up on this. And so people were not trading like that anymore. And quite frankly, they were trading overseas a lot more too. And so there was more international commerce and they couldn't trade, they weren't trading like farmers anymore. Couldn't do that. They were trading on caravans and they were trading on ships. And so they couldn't do this anymore. They couldn't have these debts that they couldn't pay out, that you could not collect on. No one would do business. And that's what Rabbi Hillel said. If people don't do business, how can we have any economy? And so they changed it. They essentially changed the Torah law. And you could charge interest. and you could collect after 7 years. The guidance behind this is there shall be no needy among you, since your God Adonai will bless you in the land that God Adonai is giving you as a hereditary portion. If only you heed God Adonai and take care to keep all this instruction that I enjoined upon you, Hayom, this day. For your God Adonai will bless you as promised. You will extend loans to many nations, but require none yourself. You will dominate many nations, but they will not dominate you. That was the hope. And that is the hope.
So this is every 7 years?
Yeah.
So every 7 years,
And that's where our 7 year, well, it's not 7 years anymore, but used to be able to write off this, yeah.
you could dispatch a bankruptcy.
Uh-huh.
That's where it comes from.
Mhm.
But
Yep.
I,
What? Well, we
So
did
we
away
know
with that
this-
too, didn't
we
we?
know this text.
We
is-
didn't, we did away with that too, didn't we?
What, the 7 years?
Yeah.
No, I think it takes a while to.
Yeah, but it's not 7 years anymore.
It's got it.
It's not gone off your credit after 7 years.
That's not good, shouldn't.
We basically said when half the country declared bankruptcy in 2009, we can't do that anymore. Can't tell people. It was so rare. When it was rare, people would say, yeah, yeah.
But-
Not
but-
rare anymore.
So we know this is old,
Yeah.
I think. It just never ceases to amaze me, some of the text I'm reading in both Tuesday and Wednesday.
Yeah.
I mean, this goes back thousands of years.
Because people haven't really changed. They're doing the same stuff. They're doing the same stuff. The underlying need, look, there's an underlying need for loans to be made for there to be commerce. Everybody knows that. But the issue is that it doesn't lead to good things. It says extending loans to many nations, but require none yourself. The optimal situation is not to be a debtor nation, right? It's not to be in a situation where the nation owes something to another country.
That's a pretty good point, though.
Mhm.
Like they understood modern geopolitics. Where, like,
Right.
yeah, if you owe people money, you're not in control of anything.
Yeah.
If you don't have money, you don't have agency. Because people who owe you money, or people that you owe money to, they're gonna tell you what to do.
Yeah, they'll call the shots.
That's right.
So
So
that
it
is,
shouldn't-
If you respect that relationship. If you don't respect that relationship, then.
I mean, yeah,
That
like,
does
that,
work.
I mean, that's part of America's thing, because we have a big enough stick, we don't have to worry when people come calling.
well, that's the
The
that's the argument, right? That
Yeah,
if
that's
China
what-
ever
that's what
called
it
in its debts, we would just go to war against them and wipe the debt off.
Is this at the macro level, or is it also?
Oh, no, this is a macro level.
Yeah, it's-
Is it? No, it is a micro level. That's what it said right back here.
That's why,
Yeah,
Well, yeah, but it gets on both the macro and the
Yeah.
micro, because on the macro, it's like, yeah, you as a nation, if you have countries in your pocketbook, then you can tell them what you can and can't do. Because if you owe them money, then later on down the line, you're like, no, you're gonna buy grain from me because you owe me money. So you do that, but then it understands it on the micro level, because if you're talking about earning money, they're like, yeah, I don't want you other Jews owing each other money, because the biggest thing to ruin a relationship with somebody is money. So if you're spending all your time with your own kinsmen arguing over money, you're never gonna be friends. So that's why they're like, okay, forget it. Who cares about the random foreigner from Damascus? Because he's not your friend anyway, so who cares?
you're absolutely right. You're gonna see it in the next line too. So it's in the next line as well. So yes, no, he's also, he actually did, but he actually knows. So that is a big problem. One of the things, again, that people don't understand, and I will just insert this because we talked about Israel's foreign policy that came out come out in the debates and it's been discussed. Well, it didn't come out in the debates, but it kind of was discussed a little bit. But this issue of Israel's foreign aid, and I don't think people fully understand, what the foreign aid is based on, because we need that. The United States needs that foreign aid. It's not the simple answer was because we need Israel to have a strong military so it doesn't get into a situation like they did in 73, right? That's the silly, superficial argument. It's not the argument. The argument really of what is going on here, just so you understand, is that Israel gets this money. and again, the majority of that money has to be spent back in the United States. So just so you understand, it's a game, and the game benefits us because if Israel's given a check to buy weapons from American institutions. If Israel doesn't do that, then, and if Israel didn't have to do that, the aid is conditional on that money being, and believe me, it's been an issue in Israel because Israeli arms manufacturers say, why can't we spend that money internally? And Israel says, because everyone knows that the money is conditioned on us buying the stuff from Lockheed and from Northrop and from all the defense. It's money being spent here so that American weapons are deployed overseas. It's a game.
Which is tragic, because IWI makes good guns.
Well, oh yes, everybody knows that Israel. Everybody knows that Israel can make the guns. So yes,
So, but that's all the-
but it's a game, and it is essentially a lend-lease situation where the weapons get deployed in Israel. It's a game, and people don't understand that. They just say, "Oh, we're spending all this money in Israel." Well, the money is being spent in your backyard, folks, and it used to be spent here in California until we chased away all of our defense contractors, and they all went to Texas with the Schulmans. But if we had those industries here too, and it is really, actually, I'm saying that jokingly, but it's serious, because California used to have something besides entertainment industry that supported it, which was our, and now we're way too dependent on that. But we had, and it's so sad because I see that, I see these families now, and I oftentimes when I'm officiating at a funeral, this is a guy who came out here to LA to be in the defense industry, was an engineer, was a contractor, was working in the finance office, at these places, Rocketdyne and Hughes and all these other places. And these guys, their companies aren't here anymore. I mean, let alone they've been retired 20 or 30 years, but their companies aren't here anymore. And every time I think about it, I think about that, like, I grew up with these kids. I mean, those kids were my friends. Their dads were all worked in the defense industry, and it's gone. And it's all been driven out of California. So it was a part of our economy, and that money was being spent in California, and it's not anymore, but it is being spent. The majority of that Israeli money, if you will, is being spent here, just so you know. And it's
So
the vast majority of it. I think Israel gets to keep like 30% of the money on Israeli. I think it's 30%. It might be like 20%, but it was, I think the Israelis were trying to push it to like 30%, that 30% of the money could be spent on Israeli, on his homegrown Israeli defense industries. But just so you know, that's the reality of the money. That's the majority of those checks that Israel gets.
That's the foreign aid that anti-Israel people
Yes.
complain about.
Yes, and
Because I get that a lot, so I always try to.
you literally, Jesse, look it up, you can get the exact percentage of what the dollar amount is. But
Is that off something like from DOD?
oh yeah. You can look at what
Like on US government?
yeah, you can go on to the breakdown of the package. I mean, APAC always publishes it, but you don't have to trust APAC. You can go on to an American site and look at what the number is. It's staggering how much of the money is actually spent here in the country, and they never say that. They always say we're sending all this money to Israel, a blank check. It's like, no, it's not. You're absolutely completely misinformed, because the money literally is like, okay, this is how much, and they know it. They actually sit down with the Israelis, come out with the defense industries and say, okay, this is how much is going to be spent this year here. This is how much is going to be spent there. This is how much, and they really, I mean, they have some control over it, but it's not, just so you know, it's not a blank check, and it's not what it's presented as. And you hear people say it, and they just said it a couple of days ago. So it bothers
Just
me.
to add on that, was very interesting when they come out of closed doors hearings, all those they come out and change too. So
Well, they also get to see stuff that you and I don't get to see.
we're not privy.
And when they see that stuff, then it blows their minds, because when they see what they're getting dollar for dollar out of Israel, because Israel they have a much higher level of accountability when it comes to defense. And it's partly because Israelis, I hate to say it, but they don't even trust other Israelis. So if an Israeli business person tells you, hey, we're doing business here, they're going to check their own people. And they have such a high level of distrust or I'd say the assumption is that somebody is trying to pull one over on you, that they don't get away with it in Israel. They really don't. And so the stuff that we've had in our country where I talk about the $3,000 screwdriver and stuff like that, Israel doesn't allow that to happen. And look, but they have to play the game. I mean, Israel is paying for those things too, because they have to spend the money in America. So anyways, just to understand, it's not like Israelis are necessarily better at this. They just have a different outlook on it. And the outlook is, what are you trying, how are you trying to take advantage of? And they assume that they're being taken advantage of. So, because it's just the way they think. Doesn't make them better. It doesn't make them necessarily smarter. It just they have a different attitude when it comes to that. So, all right. So let's read this idea again. You will dominate many nations, but they will not dominate you. If, however, there is a needy person among you, one of your kin in any of your settlements in the land that your God Adonai is giving you, do not harden your heart and shut your hand against your needy kin. Rather, you must open your hand and lend whatever is sufficient to meet that need. That is, again, as Jesse was saying, what's the micro level? And there it is. And here's the line where it tells you flat out, beware lest you harbor this base thought, right? The seventh year, the year of remission is approaching, so that you are mean and give nothing to your needy kin, who will cry out to Adonai against you, and you will incur guilt. Give readily and have no regrets when you do so. For in return, your God Adonai will bless you in all your efforts and in all your undertakings. For there will never cease to be needy ones in your land, which is why I command you, open your hand to the poor and needy kin in your land. Now it says flat out, God will take care of you. God's going to give you good things if you follow the rules, if you do your tithes, and if you take care of the land and you give a sabbatical year and all those other things. But it also tells us this, there will never cease to be needy ones in your land. There'll always be people. And they're saying if you follow the rules, it's going to be okay, but there'll still always be needy. So open your hand to the poor and needy kin in your land. And that's what it says. It says that you have a responsibility to take care of those in need. Now, again, there's an understanding that this is not great. This is not the way it should be. And we don't want to create a class of people who are constantly relying on aid. It's not a good situation to be in. So this is the difference between, again, what the Torah assumes, which is that there will always be needy people, but not that this is going to be a permanent underclass of people who are constantly in need of help. That's the difference. It doesn't say there's always going to be the same person or the same tribe or the same people who are going to be in need of help. And it's a pretty powerful line. What does the King James translation have for that line 11, by the way, Mary?
The poor shall never cease out of the land. Therefore I command thee, saying, thou shalt open thy hand wide into thy brother, to the poor, and to the needy.
Yeah. So this is an idea that Judaism had, that you had to take care of the poor in your community. This did not exist. This law doesn't exist in the Greek and Greco-Roman codes.
No.
That law doesn't exist. It does not say that. So again, give readily, God will bless you. And again, this is this understanding that God will take care of you. As you take care of the poor, God will also take care of you as you do it. You don't have to think that giving to the poor is then going to have this effect on you where I'm going to give all my money to the poor. No, the Bible says you'll do okay too. You'll be fine. You're not going to give away all your money. And this is the law of indentured servitude. If a fellow Hebrew man or woman is sold to you, he shall serve you 6 years, and in the 7th year you shall set him free. When you set him free, do not let him go empty-handed. Furnish him out of the flock, the threshing floor and vat with which your God has blessed you. Adonai has blessed you, right? So this is the law, that a person cannot be a slave to you if he's a Hebrew. So
It's not.
if he's not a Hebrew, right? If he's not a Hebrew, then the law is different. So there's an Eved Ivri, which is the Hebrew slave, and then there's the Hebrew, and there's the non-Hebrew, Eved Kanani, the Canaanite slave. And so the Canaanite slave can be a slave for you beyond the time. We'll get to that. And the Bible actually talks about the times when that would happen, right? But for Jews, you cannot have a person indentured servitude. We read about it in Leviticus. We have it here again too. It's the same rule again, why indentured servants were brought over into this country from a movie that Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman were in years ago, Far and Away, which was about indentures. Tom Cruise played an indentured servant, an indentured Irish servant. They were brought over to America and to Australia.
It's still pretty similar to slavery.
It's pretty similar to
So
slavery.
like America didn't really practice biblical slavery.
But based on the Bible, you couldn't put a fellow Hebrew in slave forever. And you had to pay them when they left. You had to give them something to help start their lives. And it actually tells us why. Bear in mind that you were slaves in the land of Egypt, and your God Adonai redeemed you. Therefore, I enjoin this commandment upon you this day, right? So it's because you were slaves. Now, here's the weird corollary, though. But should he say to you, I do not want to leave you, for he loves you and your household and is happy with you, you shall take an awl and put it through his ear into the door, and he shall become your slave in perpetuity. Do the same with your female slave. So if a man or a woman decides that they do not want to leave, you mark them with they don't stay there the whole time. It's not like they're stuck to the wall the whole time, but there's a ritual of piercing their ear, which allows them to be at least outwardly marked as a slave. Why would someone want to do it? Well, it just tells you that they didn't want to leave. He likes living with you. It is not ideal. They're not looking for people to be in this situation, which is probably why they had to be marked in some way, because they were not doing something that like they were really supposed to be doing. But the Bible allows for it. The Bible basically says there are people who are going to be so dependent on you that you're going to literally have them as part of your household. I can only tell you that when I first read this law as a kid, it always sticks out. You know, you read something like this is a weird law, no question about it. This is one of those laws. I remember my mom saying it too as a kid. You know, it's like, what's this awl in the door? It's a weird law. I thought it was a weird law. I mean, I was trying to think how would this happen? And of course, you know, you're raised in this country and you're like, you know, slavery is a terrible thing. And don't worry, I'm not going to counter that idea of saying slavery is a terrible thing. But we do know that when slaves were allowed and given freedom, that there were slaves in some cases that didn't want to leave. It's a fact. And I never really understood it. I couldn't figure it out why people didn't want to leave, but it definitely is some kind of condition that develops where people become so dependent on someone else.
Or if they're treated like, for want of better words, like human beings.
And like family.
Like family.
Yeah.
You have the same thing when they're in
Because the biblical definition of slavery is not the American version where you beat the crap out of them, make them sleep in
Yeah.
pigsties. Like that's strictly anti-biblical. Because like the whole thing is you're supposed to treat them well, give them resources, give them a bed, you have to feed them before you feed yourself, you have to give them
Yeah.
shot up as well. So people are like, hey, I get you to offer a fair amount of my agency and I get a room and board and food for the next 40 some odd years until the year of Jubilee sets me free regardless, like, I'll take that.
Yeah.
Like, well, at least from Prager's.
Yeah. I will tell you that I've seen it in my own life. I've seen it with people I know. I've seen it with people I know. I've seen it to some extent. I've seen it up close. So I can understand why it's not my wife. Don't be thinking I'm sitting there thinking my wife is. No, we've had similar situations where you're wondering, did someone give us too much agency? So anyways, the relationships are complicated and they develop, gosh, I don't want to get into it, but there are relationships that develop that become more family. I'll leave it at that. And I'll say that I seen it up close, and I'll leave it at that. Just because I don't want anyone to say, did he just say what I think he said? I said, no, I said, I've seen a version of it and I've seen it up close in the sense that I get it. I mean, I can understand why this law existed. Because at first you're reading, this is like, when would this ever happen? This is crazy. This is a crazy thing. Well, it's difficult for us because we live in a world where, generally speaking, again, we're so far removed from this kind of relationship, but
I mean, I guess us in the developed world, because like slavery
Oh, yeah.
is bigger than it's ever been.
there's
We wouldn't
definitely,
have chocolate if it wasn't for slavery.
There's
The only
definitely-
way you can get chocolate in America is through slave labor.
listen, Jesse, the reality is for 99.9% of human history, there have been slaves. 99.9% of the world, 99.9% of human history. There were people who were constantly and perpetually born into a slave situation, a caste situation, some type of situation where they were born into a less powerful situation by simply being born to the family that they were born into. But we're talking about, again,
But then wouldn't.
thousands of years of culture.
But wouldn't Torah be pretty big then? Because it's realizing, at least at the time, where it's like, okay, this is a human inevitability. We can, if it goes away, whatever, but at least at the time they thought that was gonna be the way it was. The
It's a-
thing of like, but you have to treat them as humans because you are human and you were a slave too, but then you have to
Yes,
treat the slaves well, set them free, provide for them, and then if they still can't do it well, you still have an obligation to provide for them because the commandments were just stated. So it's going a really long way in saying like eventually this isn't like it is a way to generate
yeah.
labor and good treatment
Look,
of people. Because
it-
for most of slavery in America before the Hebrews in modern time, like it's all based off chattel slavery where you just run them until they die. That's what's happening to the Uyghurs. Like that is strictly unbiblical and not moral at all.
Yeah, and most slavery was non-biblical, right?
Yeah.
And the situations in India, for example, for billions of people over thousands of years were that kind of situation. Look, one of the things that people don't understand is as it's played out in India, for example. So somebody just said, "What about India?" Right? Who said it? Doreen, you said, "Look, one of the reasons why you have this interesting religious dynamic in India that you have was that for centuries, Hindus would convert to Islam because it broke the cycle of the caste system. People don't realize that, but really the only way to get out of being in a lower caste system in India was to become a Muslim, because once you became a Muslim, essentially you started fresh. So all of those that caste system that you were born into.
That was the other way around because the dhimmi, but
Yes, but in India, it functioned in the other way. The irony, of course, as Jesse is saying, is that Islamic countries are the last countries that still, again, that tolerate slavery or
well, I was gonna
Muslim
say also
countries.
because the dhimmi is kind of similar to the rule here where they're like.
A lower caste or
Well, no,
treated a different caste.
One of is the command we just read, which is
Charging
charging
interest,
to foreigners, but not to your own men.
Yeah.
Like your own kind. So the dhimmi is a thing in Islam where it's like the foreigners charge them more. So like since I were a Jew there, provided I don't get shot for it, but like they would charge me a dhimmi tax.
Yeah.
Just
Where's
because
Dhimmi? Where's that?
that is, that's a non-Islamic tax.
I don't know what it means in Arabic, I forgot. I think
No, it's the dhimmi,
It's a service.
a dhimmi was look, there was a tax, there was two different things though.
Dhimmi, yeah, but
You-
it's a tax for being in a Muslim country, not being a Muslim.
Yeah, but wait, so dhimmi is the status. The jizya is the actual tax that
Okay.
Islamic, the Islamic
I've heard it called the dhimmi.
courts, yes. But that is how Islam was able to essentially also encourage conversion to Islam, because if you became Muslim, you no longer had that tax. But it didn't really go into effect in India because it's not controlled. They don't control they, at least in the majority country. There were parts of India before it was independent that were under Islamic law. But anyways, today that's one of the reasons why it's still an issue in India. I mean, the Islamic and Hindu tensions in India are partially exacerbated by the fact that people can get out of that situation, and it still happens to this day. That every day there are thousands of Hindus who convert to Islam to escape the caste system. So it happens, and it's still happening right now at this moment. When you do set either one free, do not feel aggrieved, for in the 6 years you've been given double the service of a hired worker. Moreover, your God and I will bless you in all you do. You shall consecrate to your God. And again, it doesn't give us all the laws of slavery that Jesse was referring to. It talks about slavery extensively in the Talmud, and basically discourages it from the standpoint of saying, you better make sure your slave is getting fed first. You better make sure your slave has a comfortable area to sleep in. You better make sure that your slave is taken care of, because God's going to hold you accountable if you did that. So there were rules that made slavery accountable in Jewish law. But at the end of the day, these are the guiding laws from the Torah, which are God has taken care of you as you've benefited from the labor that this person has given you. So you shall consecrate to your God Adonai all the male firstlings that are born in your herd and in your flock. You must not work your firstling ox or shear your firstling sheep. And that is the firstborn of the animals that are dedicated to God, which probably says the note here too. Yeah. You and your household shall eat it annually before your God Adonai in the place that Adonai will choose. But if it has a defect, lameness or blindness, any serious defect, you shall not sacrifice it to your God. Eat it in your settlements, the impure among you no less than the pure, just like the gazelle and the deer. Okay, so they're talking about your ox and your sheep and your goats, but it says you can also be eating gazelle and deer, which are not normal animals that you would think of as being kosher, but they're kosher animals. They're only not kosher because most people hunt those animals. But if you raise them and you're not killing them in a normal way of hunting and not killing them immediately and not shechting them, which is again slitting their. Somebody said to me today, I was talking about it with somebody who works for the Park Service. Is about, well, what if it's a clean brain shot? I said, no, it doesn't make it kosher. I said, because you're encouraging people to still do that, which is not always going to be the case. You can't say, well, in this case, we know that the only way you know is if you literally slit its jugular vein. And then again, you must not partake of its blood. You shall pour it out on the ground like water. So again, these are the rules that it ends with, which it doesn't necessarily make sense, but it kind of went back to some of the stuff that we read with the animals. Now,
And how are we allowed to use blood in breaking our matzah?
yeah, exactly. We can't have blood, of course. But by the way, Sheldon, when you raise that issue of blood in the matzah, part of it goes to the fact that the Passover sacrifice had blood in it. It just weren't supposed to eat it, but you weren't. But the fact that you had Passover sacrifice and matzah together, which we're about to read right now, that's why it got confusing. And not least of which is when Jesus says, "This is my blood," and he's talking about, again, the wine, but when he's talking about it at the Last Supper, it gets further conflated because of the Christian Bible. So the Christian Bible amplifies this attachment to blood at the Passover sacrifice. I mean, we know why Jesus said it. He was telling his followers, or if he said it, or if his followers said it, some other writer said it, he didn't say it. We don't know for sure. But if he says it, or whoever says it, he's just amplifying the message of Passover by saying, "I'm the Passover sacrifice." That's all he's doing. So the fact is that they contributed to the blood libel by essentially creating that midrash or perpetuating that midrash that exists in the Christian Bible. I don't think, if Jesus said it, I don't think he meant it literally. Didn't matter. It became part of the consciousness of the people who read it and who were taught that. So naturally, they were going to go back to, oh yeah, Jews use blood in the matzah. Well, here's what it says about Passover right here in chapter 16. It begins with this, and you can see why Passover was so important to our ancestors. Observe the month of Aviv and offer a Passover sacrifice to your God, Adonai, for it was in the month of Aviv at night that your God, Adonai, freed you from Egypt. Well, you know that. And here it says you offer a Passover sacrifice for that. You shall slaughter the Passover sacrifice for your God Adonai from the flock and herd in the place Adonai will choose to establish the divine name, Jerusalem. So far it's talking about the Passover sacrifice. And now it says, you shall not eat anything leavened with it for 7 days thereafter. You shall not eat unleavened bread, bread of distress, for you departed from the land of Egypt hurriedly, so that you may remember the day of your departure from the land of Egypt as long as you live. For 7 days no leaven shall be found with you in your territory, and none of the flesh of what you slaughter on the evening of the first day shall be left into the morning. Let's read the whole Passover thing and we'll go back. You are not permitted to slaughter the Passover sacrifice in any of the settlements that your God Adonai is giving you, but at the place where your God Adonai will choose to establish the divine name. There alone shall you slaughter the Passover sacrifice in the evening at sundown at the time of day when you departed Egypt. You shall cook and eat it at the place your God Adonai will choose. And in the morning you may start back on your journey home. After eating the unleavened bread for 6 days, you shall hold a solemn gathering for your God Adonai on the seventh day. You shall do no work. That is the law of Passover. It doesn't say anything here about horseradish. It doesn't say anything here about eating an egg. It doesn't say anything about afikomen. It doesn't say any of that stuff.
No.
It does say that you have a Passover sacrifice, and it does say you eat matzah. But it does also say that you eat that Passover sacrifice only in Jerusalem. If you read this and thought this is the way we're supposed to celebrate Passover, you wouldn't necessarily think you're doing it in your house. You also wouldn't necessarily think that
But it also mentioned, like it does in Leviticus, almost like it's two.
holidays, right?
Right,
So by this point, you see that the holidays have kind of merged.
right.
It's not quite one holiday, but it's not called two separate holidays. And in the Torah, earlier, it says essentially there's the first day, which is the Passover, and then the rest of the days are the Feast of Unleavened Bread.
Right.
Here, they're essentially the same holiday. Though,
That's your favorite holiday.
yeah, this is my favorite holiday.
Much doesn't like.
But it really is interesting because it is still, you can still see that the holidays are blending together. They're not
Right.
quite there yet,
Yeah.
because the Passover sacrifice is the sacrifice that's offered in Jerusalem, and that's the focus, right? And that has to be done
In Jerusalem.
in Jerusalem. And so if you can imagine what that would have been like, because it seems as though, based on this, they went to Jerusalem for Passover, that night. And then it says, you shall not eat anything of unleavened bread thereafter. It says, after eating unleavened bread 6 days, you shall hold a solemn
So
gathering.
it's kind of two, you're still separating.
Yeah, and you still see it's like, well, what is it? Is it a holiday? Is the unleavened bread the holiday? And that's what we do back in our homes. That's what it seems like. I mean, I think that that's what is like, if you read the plain meaning of it, that's what's happening here. Now, it's clearly important. It's clearly seen as, look, it's the first holiday mentioned here in Deuteronomy. It's the first holiday that we get.
Well, that, and then it was the beginning of the year too.
And that's what it kind of, yeah, it's really a time of, as you can see, a time of going to Jerusalem for sacrifice. Now, it says in the Bible, in Deuteronomy, it says, and you saw it, you shall slaughter the Passover sacrifice in the place where Adonai will choose to establish the divine name. Now, we know that to be Jerusalem. And you know where I'm going with this, Mike. The Samaritans believe it's Mount Gerizim,
Right.
and they still do the Passover sacrifice to this day on Mount Gerizim. So a few hundred Jews gather every year for Passover on Mount Gerizim under the protection of the Israeli army, and they will perform this. Now, I've never been there because I want to celebrate Passover with my family, but part of me has always wanted to see this. You can see it on video. You can see the Passover offering that they make, and they do exactly what this says you do, because they do follow the Torah.
I'm assuming.
Now, they
do
don't
one
keep
sacrifice,
all
not
Bible.
many.
What?
Assuming they do one sacrifice, not many.
Every head of household
Oh,
does.
really? They'll do.
So every head of household does it. And they, it says exactly what it does right here, Deuteronomy. They don't leave any of it over. They don't let any of it stay past that time.
What about the Karaites?
The Karaites don't do it because they kept Jerusalem. And once Jerusalem was destroyed. But the Samaritans never recognized Jerusalem. And so for them, they were able to continue to do it. So they look, the Samaritans only read the Bible through the book of Joshua. They have 6 books. They have 6 books of the Bible. They don't have Psalms. They don't have, but they have this, and they have the law of keeping Passover. So it tells us in the Torah, the next holiday, it says, you shall count off 7 weeks, start to count the 7 weeks when the sickle is first put to the standing grain. Now, is that Passover? We assume that it's Passover, but there may or may not be. So there was an argument over when Shavuot started, because some people, and I'm not just talking about Samaritans, I'm talking about Jews, some of them, including the people who lived at the Dead Sea at Qumran, did not keep Shavuot based on Passover. They had a calendar where they kept it according to what the Bible says, which is when they started the harvest. It says, you shall observe the Feast of Weeks for your God Adonai, offering your free will contribution according as God Adonai has blessed you. You shall rejoice before your God Adonai with your son and daughter, your male and female slave, a family of the Levite in your communities, and the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow in your midst, in the place where your God Adonai will choose to establish the name, the divine name. Bear in mind that you were a slave in Egypt, and take care to obey these laws. Again, in Jerusalem.
So would people stay or would they go home?
No, they went home and then they came back 7 weeks later.
Okay.
And so they had to rejoice again, another time of celebration, which is always good to rejoice. And this was clearly, as you can see, a time of offering up grain. This was a offering up of the harvest, less a sacrifice, at least according to this. Where's the animal, right? It's not really here. I just showed it to you. So it's really about offering up the grain sacrifice, the wheat sacrifice, and having fun with that. After the ingathering from your threshing floor and your vat, you shall hold the Feast of Booths for 7 days. That's Sukkot. And that's coming up in a few weeks, in about a month, actually. You know how I know? Because there's going to be a full moon, right? A full moon
That was the first time I came
is
here.
1 month. Well, a month from Friday will be the first night of Sukkot. So this is an important holiday for us because it's also a time of bringing your sacrifices, your offerings that are grain and wine. It says your vat. So the rest of your produce, and it says Hag HaSukkot. So that's why it translates it as Feast of Booths, but that's Hag HaSukkot. And again, you shall rejoice in your festival. Samachta bechagecha. You shall be happy. It's a time of joy. And that's what we call Sukkot, the time of joy. We call it Zman Simchatenu, the season of our joy. We call Passover Zman Cherutenu, the season of our freedom, but we call this time the season of our joy. That's where we have Simchat Torah at the end. Your male and your female slave, the family, the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow in your communities. You shall hold a festival for your God Adonai 7 days. In the place Adonai will choose. For your God Adonai will bless all your crops, all your undertakings, and you shall have nothing but sameach, joy. Shall be happy. 3 times a year, on the feast of unleavened bread, on the feast of weeks, and on the feast of booths, all your males shall appear before your God Adonai in the place that God will choose. They shall not appear before Adonai rekam, empty-handed, but each with his own gift, according to the blessing that your God Adonai has bestowed upon you. Ish kamatnat yado. I remember these lines because this was my Torah portion as a kid. And I always loved that line. I actually think that was what I wrote in my Devar Torah. Ish kamatnat yado. I love that. Each according to his own gift, which means each of us has our own unique gift, right? Each one of us has something that we can bring, and it's our gift. It's not somebody else's gift. It's not our parents' gift. It's not our wife or husband's gift. It's our gift, and it is to some extent based on the blessings that we have. So monetarily, it's not going to be the same. And I knew that as a kid. I knew that because I had friends who were much wealthier than I was, and I had friends who were not as wealthy as I was. And I knew that some of it didn't seem to make sense, but I knew that God must appreciate whatever we can bring. So whatever people bring is
God's updated 6 minutes.
there's your sweet. There's your sweet, Mike. But yeah, each person according to their abilities and what they have, their income. And I've shared this before, but I have it right on my desk as a constant reminder. It's not on my desk on top of the desk, but it's always on my desk. And that is a check that was given to me as a donation from a prisoner who gave I think it was about $100 to the synagogue. And I made a copy of that check and I still have it because I computed that at the rate that he was getting paid, which I think was like 13 cents an hour, that was about 2 months of salary that he had donated to the temple. And that's one of the checks that I tell people is one of the most valuable checks I have. Somebody,
My primitive Hebrew, is that his hand, Yado?
yeah,
Mhm,
each according to
his hand.
his gift, his own hand. What does your translation have, Mary? It probably has that word.
The word empty.
Oh, yeah, but what is,
Say
yeah, but does it say ish coming out yado, but each with his own gift? What does it say? On verse 17. each as he is able. That's a little bit better. But yeah. So that's the end. That's the end of the Torah portion. That was my moft here. But so it saved the best line for last. But yeah, that's where we ended the Torah portion. It's also where it's not where the Christian ending, the Christian scholars ended it a couple verses later, which I like the end of our Torah portion a little bit better here. It's a good place to stop. But as we said, there's always kind of a weird where are you going to stop Deuteronomy as its stream of consciousness. There's no and that's the end of that chapter, or that's the end of that idea. But we felt that there was a good break here. But I do want to tell you, because we're going to read, we'll get into and finish up today with the stuff from Shoftim. But just check that out, folks. 3 times a year, we were supposed to come to the temple. So people, and again, I don't want to diminish this, but people say, hey, this guy comes to temple, or she comes to temple once or twice a year. I see that person 3 times a year at the temple. At least when it came to offering and to praying or to offer up a sacrifice, we've been 3 times a year Jews for thousands of years. And it's not like, I'm not diminishing it by saying that people shouldn't come to temple. Of course they should. But the reality is that at least for the offerings, at least for the sense of giving up something of their money, that they did that 3 times a year. I think it's actually in a serious way. I think it's actually a problem that, our synagogue and most synagogues, 99% of the synagogues in America, I mean 99, but 90%. Chabad is usually a little bit better at it than we are. But most synagogues in America will rely on a system where they receive about 80-90% of their money in this month that we're in right now. And that's not a good system to be in, because it's putting a lot of pressure on 1 or 2 weeks, and it's not fair. And so if you had a system where people gave 3 times a year instead of once a year, it'd be a lot better. We obviously let people spread a payment over the whole year. If they want to make a monthly payment, they can do that, but a quarterly payment, whatever. But the point is that having everything come down to once a year is pretty tough. And again, it's strange that we do it when we do it, because as you just noticed in Deuteronomy, it didn't mention Rosh Hashanah, didn't mention Yom Kippur. Those were not mentioned at all. For our ancestors, at least during the time of Deuteronomy, it wasn't even in their head. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur weren't even in their head. Again, it's in Leviticus. I'm not saying it's not in the Bible. It is. But there was no sense of the importance of it then. And this book of Deuteronomy does not mention it. It's weird.
Now, the roads in Jerusalem must have been very busy at that time.
Are those 3 times a year?
I'm picturing roadside stands and peddlers along the way.
Probably for a good chunk of the time. Yeah.
Sounds
But-
like a good time, dude.
Yeah. But it was
You get a little
springtime.
tailgate.
Springtime. It was a tailgate. Springtime is summer, mid kind of late summer, late spring, early summer for Shavuot, and then early fall, end of summer for so it was really dependent on the harvest, right? And so it was really dependent on people's lifestyles, which I think people also miss the point, which I do want to make the point that Judaism was much more integral to people's lives, because especially during the biblical period, their livelihood was tied to the cycle of the year. And that's for the most part not the way it is. I'll say the one exception that we have, and I've been on this schedule most of my life, is the educational schedule. So our school schedule follows, for the most part, this schedule. So if you're a teacher, this is when your contract and your new employment essentially starts right around this time of year, right? So if you're what?
A month ago.
Yeah, but academically, for students and for teachers, roughly this time is the time that people are going back to work. And this was when this was if you're on that academic schedule, again, it's changing, and now it varies a lot. It could be beginning of August, or it could be after Labor Day, but it's after Labor Day, which it used to be. No schools used to go back before Labor Day. When I was a kid, only freaks went back to school. You're like, why is he in school now? Must not have done very well. He's in some special school or whatever, if he's in school in the summer. But you didn't go back to school until after Labor Day. And it was a little
Except
bit,
for some of us that were in summer school.
I just said, he must have done something really
Well, I
bad
said freaks.
or wanted to, yeah.
God still carried baggage.
Did you want to, John? I
Those
know.
were my friends.
Didn't want to, but it was not, something happened. So I said, what, why is he in summer school? What did he do? But
Sealed record.
but when you think about it, nowadays, there's no sense to it. Like, people don't know. Look, I'm not advocating for it, but it wasn't a coincidence. The only way they could get people to go to public school in this country is if they told them it wasn't going to affect their harvest time with their families, right? As long as the kids could still work in their parents' farms, they'd go to school. And that's the only way we talk parents into allowing their kids to go to school. So it's not a coincidence. It's based around the harvest. And now it's not, but it used to be. But again, the point is really I'm making is Judaism really needs to make sure that our religious schedule is attuned to our lives.
And that was the Feast of Booths, because that's Sukkot.
Yeah.
That's the joyous time, right? That's in
Yes.
October.
Yeah, so it's usually end of September, beginning of October, as it will be this year, October. Right at the end of September is when we celebrate Sukkot
No,
this
I'm
year.
just trying to.
So today, look, it's the end of summer. It's people are in a different cycle. But in all fairness, I mean, though you can make the argument it's difficult today, but the equivalent would be if we had a Jewish holiday, which we do, but if it always was, on April 15th. So if we had a Jewish holiday when people.
Well, that wouldn't be good.
No, but well, it's even worse because if you do it exactly. So many people are on extension that it won't even relate, but yes.
It's called Jackie Robinson.
It's usually around the time of Passover, but there is this understanding that, again, we're not on unified schedules anymore.
See if we can change Passover for 2024.
Why? Because on your birthday, it starts on your birthday. Yeah, Passover is very late this year.
It always was on my birthday.
The reason it's so late this year that it's actually a month after Easter. It doesn't even come
Yeah.
close. But that has to do with the way Easter is, and it has to do with the fact that Easter has to be around the full moon of spring. And it just so happens that for us, it's just a little too late. And so we're on the Jewish calendar, so whatever, it doesn't matter.
Can we change it though? Like a week before?
If you want, if you were a Samaritan or something, I don't know when the Samaritans are doing it because of Passover. Yeah. Well, my day I told you, like, this year was Tisha B'Av, so I can lose my birthday on a fast, but I'd rather have.
That's only one day.
Even though I like Passover, I'd rather have Passover food than no food on my birthday. So don't complain. Don't complain. I wouldn't choose to have that, but at least I can't eat. I couldn't eat on my birthday. I couldn't go out for dinner on my birthday. Anyways, if you thought about it, most of us are not on a unified schedule of our lives anymore. And it's kind of sad because, when people said, well, kids are going back to school. It's like, you don't even know when kids are going back to school today. You say to somebody, oh, your kid's back at school? No. Or your kid's going back to school this week? No, they've been back for a month. So you
Yeah,
never
we
know,
need to
you never
rethink the
know.
schedule. Summer school's not even a stigma anymore.
No,
When
I
kids go to summer school, they don't care anymore.
No, it's not.
And I
And
used to dread the possibility of having to take summer classes to catch up when I was in high school a decade ago, and now they're like, yeah, I'm feeling this class, let's do it in summer.
well, Jesse, I'm glad because you're a generation after me. I'm glad some things were still true when you were a kid. But yeah, it's
I used to
becoming
thought
less.
my high
It
school
doesn't
friends-
matter. There's no logic to it.
They didn't have
There's
air
no
conditioning
logic.
back then.
I know, there's no logic to it.
They didn't have what?
Air conditioning,
Oh.
but yeah, but we're not on unified schedule.
Start the school here in Los Angeles County, so the break at the end of the first semester is winter break. That's their whole reasoning when they started.
Yeah, well, they still actually are a little closer to the traditional schedule in LA Unified, but all I'm saying is that most Americans are not on a recognizable schedule where we say, this is now what we do as Americans, we're going back to work, or we're doing this, or there's no rhyme or reason for it anymore. And
Maybe the Europeans have a plan.
they definitely still have that in many countries, including the Middle East and other places where there's definitely like a season where people are on vacation and then they're not on vacation anymore.
Like the Europeans, I think some of them, I thought they had like a weird schedule where there was no like long-term break. It was just they do 3 weeks of school, they get like 4 days off or something, and then 3 weeks of school and then another like week off and something like that over and over. And they get a longer break in winter for Christmas because most of them are Christian countries, so they'll take the Christmas time off for an extra like month or so.
Yeah.
And they just keep doing that. Like it's consistent at least. Like you have 3 or 4 weeks of school and then a week off.
I don't know that America's ever going to have any kind of,
It took them so long
unified.
just to finally change the start times for the high school, so the teenagers don't have to get up at 6 in the morning.
Yeah, I don't think we're going back to, especially now, I don't think we're going back to a unified schedule. So it is what we're dealing with now. But I do think, anyways, Judaism does need to line up better with our lives in the sense that it needs, I think Judaism should be more, because it always was, it was organically part of our lives, and to separate it and to say, oh, well, that's what I do when I'm Jewish, it doesn't make any sense. And to have it as more of a part of our lives, I think is the key to how we're gonna, how we're gonna succeed as a people, and how we're going to really, I think, hopefully.
Was not also just general acceptance for most, I guess, pious sort of communities is like, it would be better though for people to have structure. Because a big thing that's been destroying not just religious communities, but a lot of communities in general after COVID was the thing is like, there's no structure anymore. So people like go in and out of schools constantly, go in and out of work because it's all at home. People now have bad work cultures because they have to take their work home. And then it just like toxifies everything. And I'm like, you need to segregate all your stuff. Like, don't bring work home. Don't bring work other places. Don't bring your joy into it. Like, split things around.
Yeah.
And
And
have a structure of like, this is my me time. Like, that was the, since I started learning about it, like relatively recent, so I really like the idea of Shabbat is like, everything's done now. This is me time. I'm enjoying myself now.
yeah. And I think people, yeah, and I think people have, you're right, because
I talked to a lot of my friends who are very devout Christians and like they have such a strong work ethic. But they're all over the place. I'm like, how do you like not have a Shabbat where you just shut everything down and enjoy yourself? They're so all over the place with their stuff. They're like, yeah, I'm gonna go here and then back, and then I'm gonna work, and then I'm gonna come here and work, and I'm gonna go over here and work. Like, there's no structure. You're just working, killing yourself. Like, take some time off.
but there's also just, again, this understanding that where are they going to find that structure anyways? And so it does, there's an interesting thing where, again, ideally, it would be unified and people would know, hey, it's Saturday and I do it. I found it interesting because one of the best cases for what Jesse's talking about, which is to take a day off and to shut off the rest of work on that day, because again, people said, well, we've structured this day, it's biblical, it's a biblical ordinance. So I will tell you, and again, people are gonna say, I said it because of this, but it's not. If you watch the new Netflix just did a series called Quarterbacks, right? Which was a profile of 3 NFL quarterbacks. It was Mahomes, it was Kirk Cousins, and it was Marcus Mariota. And it's a really good documentary because it took the 3 guys last year and went all the way through them and all their year and ups and downs and all that. And the interesting thing about Kirk Cousins is it focused on, well, he's kind of the hero of it because he's like, in some extent, the most, the one who's trying to keep it, his family time, and he's really, he's seems to have his act together. Right? He seems to have a good balance, and he seems to just have a really good set of values, and he does. He's a very devout Christian, and he actually also reads the Torah, and he talks about how he reads the Bible. In the final episode, it's a little preachy, and I know it gets, he finally kind of opens up about his faith. But there's a very interesting thing that he said. He said every Tuesday he shuts down with his wife, and he takes no work calls. He doesn't matter the time of year. Tuesday is his day off. Now, it has to be his day off because the other days he has a responsibility to his work. And so he can't do it on Shabbat. But you can hear what he's saying, which is, I take this real seriously. I shut off everything. And he doesn't say it until the last episode. So you have to watch till the end to see it. But you understand that he keeps the Sabbath very seriously. So there's a wonderful video of Kirk Cousins talking to JSU students, giving a message to them about the Torah and about keeping connected to the Torah. And it's really amazing because it's to Jewish students. It has nothing. I mean, he talks about how he's Christian and how he's devout Christian, but he talks about how he reads the Torah and he quotes, some of the Bible. And he's not doing it in a way that's like the normal kind of Christian evangelical person. He's talking about the Torah in particular. And so, and I'll share it. I'll share the link here. But it really is a wonderful thing because he's very successful. He's getting paid $35 million, but he still is saying, hey, there's a day. And again, he says it's on Tuesday, not saying, he knows what he's saying. And he knows that he can only do it on that day. But if you watch the last episode, it's very clear that he's keeping the Sabbath. And he basically says that. So I will also right now put up the link to the JSU video that he did a couple years ago, which I think is just, it's just, again, I don't want to show it now. It's a couple of minutes, but I am going to post a link on the YouTube link so you can see it. And again, everyone's going to say I said it because he's my quarterback, but it's not because he's my quarterback. It's because he is giving a message of, as I just posted it right now. I will just say here, I'll just show you one of the things that he says right here. Right now, sorry.
An inerrant word of God is meant to be followed, enables us to live life the way He meant to be. And
It's because it's getting for my sound.
what it says, and I think of the promise that God made to Abraham when He said, "I will bless you. I will make your name great. I will make you a great nation, and all nations of the earth will be blessed through you." And now, 3,000 plus years have passed. That promise was made, and you look back and see the role of the Jewish people, probably less than 1% of the world, the contribution they have made to this, the inventions, the business success, even just humor, obedience, in so many different areas of life. I think specifically in our country, in America, the role Jewish people have played was so significant, and you see the fulfillment of the promise everywhere you go. And I'm so grateful that I've been able to be blessed by Jewish people. My boss,
my own. Yeah. So I will tell you that it's a great message, and it's one that it's really nice to hear an athlete not just talking about again, he's speaking specifically about why the Jewish people are a blessing to the country. So I will tell you, Yeah, I just posted the link, but if you look it up. I do want to finish up with this one line from the next Torah portion. As we kind of finish up chapter 16. This is the beginning of I get pretty emotional when I watch that video because it gets even better. But this next line, I think almost everything that you want to know about America and about Judaism is almost embedded in this next line. And I will show you it right now because let me just post this up. This line from the Torah is quoted often. Shoftim and Shotrim. You shall appoint justices, magistrates, and officials, judges for your tribes, in all settlements that your God Adonai is giving you, and they shall govern the people with due justice, which we sometimes say, mishpat tzedek, equal justice. Those words are over our Supreme Court. You shall not judge unfairly. You shall show no partiality. You shall not take bribes, for bribes blind the eyes of the discerning and upset the plea of the just. Which, by the way, in Judaism, blind justice is not a good justice. Blind justice is justice where you don't see all the facts. Blind justice is the opposite of what we're supposed to be, which is able to see this and understand it and be discerning in our judgment.
It's a bit Hellenistic, the blind judge thing.
Correct, right? Which is crazy. And here's the line. Justice, justice shall you pursue, that you may thrive and occupy the land that your God Adonai is giving you. Tzedek, tzedek, tirdof. Those three lines, those three words, not three lines, those three words. Justice, justice you shall pursue. And so it tells us that, and again, this powerful line from the Torah, it's not easy. Justice doesn't fall into our laps. It's not something that we're given easy access to all the times. The answers aren't always in front of us. And it's not always something that we can expect to have come to us without work. Pursuit means, by definition, we have to chase after it. We have to get it. We have to work at it. In some cases, we have to literally pursue it, which means almost again becoming in our own minds single-minded in that pursuit and not allowing it to escape us. Again, without it, we can't thrive. We can't live in the land that God is giving us. So this is an interesting concept for us as Americans because we believe, again, in equal justice under the law. That is our goal, is to achieve that. That's why it's on our Supreme Court. I had a discussion about this today with for about 25 minutes, very long discussion with a guy who's actually got an interesting following, a large following. I was talking with John Voight today for about literally 25 minutes about this issue. Yeah. And we were talking about it because, again, as somebody who's very involved politically as he is, I said, look, because he asked me flat out, he says, what do you think about Netanyahu? And I said, look, the issue in Israel, and I knew what he was going to say. So I knew kind of where he was coming from too. Because I said, look, in Israel, they're trying to achieve a situation where, and he knows it, and he agreed with me. I mean, that's why he asked me, make sure that I was on the same page with him, but that Israel is trying to achieve a situation where the justice system at least has some accountability. And people are like, well, the justice system, Netanyahu is trying to take over the justice system so that he doesn't get arrested. Look, there's a part of it that you wonder, again, it's fair to wonder what is his motivation? Is his motivation his own personal situation? But the reality is that he's pretty much safe now because of his party being in they have a political majority. So he's not really in danger. But there is a problem in Israel, and there has been for a long time, that again, the judges in Israel have no accountability. They're not elected. And they have no, we have checks and balances in this country to some extent. But I always, and I said it to him jokingly, but I've said it, and I said it here on the Bema. Americans lecturing Israel about our justice system is ludicrous because our justice system is insane.
I was like, America's no longer even governed by justice
Well,
as of 5 years ago.
But what will happen, right? And we actually both agreed on this, is the next step that'll happen in this country. And I'm telling you, we've set it up. We've set it up. And I'm going to tell you this, and you're going to say, maybe you said it, but I'm now on tape saying this. So I'll go back and play the tape. The next thing that will happen in this country, and I guarantee you it's going to happen, is we will have a Supreme Court justice assassinated and killed so that somebody else can be appointed. I'm telling you, that's what the system's been set up for. So before we go and lecture people about
Especially
what's
because our
gonna
judges are the same way. They're not elected. They're not held accountable.
I'm telling
Well,
you,
they're
this is,
impeached though,
but I'm telling you, this is what's going to happen.
so you can't say
No,
they can't be removed.
But it doesn't happen.
Well,
No, it's like
they're
multiple
trying pretty hard right
I
now.
understand, but until there's an answer, all I'm telling you is that America's system isn't foolproof. And it's also, as we've seen, we've had miscarriages of how the system is done. And by the way, it's been changed. I mean, it's like, don't even like, how can you not say it's been changed? Because they did away with the filibuster so that they could, I don't want to get into it because we've had a system. And again, I just talked about it with John today. And the reality is that what Judaism did is it planted in the minds of all of humanity and anyone who reads the Bible that this is not an easy thing. It's not something that we can take for granted. And every person is due justice. Every person is due justice. And as it says in other parts of the Bible, it says that means you don't show, and it says right here, don't take bribes, but you also show no partiality. As it said earlier in Leviticus, you don't defer to people who are poor because you feel bad for them.
Right.
People have to be judged again fairly, and people are due mishpat tzedek. That phrase, not just justice, but due justice. So
Profoundly intelligent as well, because normally most people are used to, right? Like you were saying earlier with caste system, it's just, you're lower off. That's what happens. I can play in like exorbitant tax rates. That's just what happens. Everyone's like, yeah, that's fair because that's been human governance for a while. But saying no, the point of politics and society isn't to reward your friends and punish your enemies. That's not the point. The point is to pursue justice.
now,
Because the Lord is justice, and so pursuing him and pursuing justice through that is the ideal. So
Yes.
if your buddy messes it up, you have to be like, look, man, you messed it up, like you gotta pay the guy back, because you trashed his yard or something.
yes. So what's interesting about our system, and as you said, Jesse, it's a Greco-Roman idea of justice being blind. The building that is a Greco-Roman building, the Supreme Court, is built in a Greco-Roman classical style, but over it are the Jewish rules, which are equal justice under the law.
Yes.
This does not exist. That law didn't exist in the Roman Empire. It was not. It couldn't exist in the Roman Empire because the Roman Empire wasn't based on equal justice to people. It also couldn't have existed, and quite frankly, isn't specified. It's not specified within Christianity. So everybody goes, "Oh, it's a Judeo-Christian. It's a Greco-Roman concept." It's not. It's a Jewish concept, and that's why I tell people the reality is, and I said that today. It's one of the last things I said to John. Is the reality is the country isn't really based on the Judeo-Christian sense of ethics and of rule of law. It's actually based on a Jewish concept of the rule of law. Because the Christian Bible, it's not that Christian Bible doesn't disregard that. It doesn't say. Christian Bible says you're supposed to keep the Torah, but whether Christianity taught that and whether Christian readers taught that is another story. But the reality is that if you follow the Torah, that's what the Torah says. And the Torah is essentially the guiding principle there. It's not anything other than the Torah when it says equal justice under the law. It's the only place you'll find it. I just want to finish up with these last two words, even though these last two verses, even though they have nothing to do with what we just read necessarily, but you could say the concept of only having God because you shall not set up a sacred post, any kind of pole beside the altar of your God Adonai that you make, or erect a stone pillar, for such God Adonai detests. That is the law of, and again, the next law, which we'll come back at next week, chapter 17, has to do with offering up sacrifices and kind of continues with ways of worshiping God. It's not necessarily a good place to break it. And again, I would have, breaking it here at the beginning of Shotim is a good place to break it. But I did want you to get a little bit of this beautiful law, which again, kind of ending with, we ended with the end of the chapter, but with this part, tzedek sherdov. It's lawyers have it on their, Jewish lawyers will sometimes have this on in their office. These three words, there's artistic versions of this that they can purchase. Jewish law enforcement people sometimes have this as well. Again, the word tzedek is repeated. Justice. It doesn't say justice you should pursue. It's repeated for emphasis, but as the rabbis say too, tzedek is repeated to some extent so that we have justice in the sense of punishment, but also justice in the sense of compassion. We have to balance those two things out to understand and to humanize people, even people when they commit crimes. But the reality is we also have to think about protecting society. So the concept of tzedek on both sides, there's different midrashim, there's different teachings about it, but understanding the repetition of this is significant, that it's there for a reason. And again, tzedek on both sides, however you want to look at it, it's a balance, right? And so that's why we always have it as a symbol, including in Judaism, scales are the balance for us as well. So again, I think those are all interesting points. I also, again, focus on that third word, tirdof, the fact that it is something you have to pursue. You have to be a pursuer of a justice. You can't just be a pursuer of it's not going to come easy. My grandmother's synagogue in Chicago was called Road Feit Tzedek. It's still there. It's on the south side of Chicago. But Road Feit Tzedek, the pursuers of justice, pursuers of righteousness. It's not the only Road Feit Tzedek in the country, but it happened to be the one that I knew and would visit when I would visit her. But that's the word rodef. A rodef is a pursuer. Does Prager have anything to say about tzedek sherdov while you have it, Jesse?
I mean, yeah, like he talks a lot about, I know he said for the tzedek part, he was talking about the Hasidics. Because the Hasidics were saying justice in the means and then justice in the ends. Like the Hasidics were saying the ends and the means have to be fair, right, to prevent that old one.
Yep.
And then,
So that's another midrash on why is it repeated.
but then also just, yeah, what I was saying earlier, just like without justice, you don't have a culture, you don't have a society.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's what we're having right now. Like there is no justice in America for a while now, and there's complete societal collapse because of it.
Yeah.
More so than in other places, but yeah. Like in LA, something bad happens to you, you call 911, the emergency line saying, help, I'm being stabbed. There's a 95-minute response time for the police. There is no justice there. So.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah, if you have a heart attack and you fall down and you're like, I just had a heart attack, I need help, please. They're like, we'll be doing, 70 to 90 minutes. You can't have a heart attack and sit there on the floor for 90 minutes and not die.
No, you're right. You're right. It's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not going to be easy.
Choose wisely where you live.
Oh, yeah.
All right, folks. Thank you very much, everybody. Stay safe, and we'll see you next week. We'll see you Wednesday. We'll see you Friday. Yeah, for services. For Shabbat.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Also, listen, if you let me.
What are you talking?